Hey folks, welcome back. Another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going to talk about a bit of a cringe topic, which is meta. I know, ew, gross, who cares, meta, try hard, sweat, this and that, terrible. I just want to play with my favorite character, which is fine, and I encourage that, right? I encourage people to pull for their favorite characters, right? To play with their favorite characters, but there's also I would say, slightly unfortunate reality, which is the meta does kind of sort of exist in this game, whether or not you like it or not. And believe me, I don't like it. Look, I don't like playing Bennett. I do not like playing Bennett, right? He's probably one of my least favorite characters in the game. And it's not much of his fault. It's just mostly he never got any interesting storylines. His character's kind of one-dimensional. I don't know. I think he's slightly boring to play, but I also have to acknowledge this is one of the best characters in the game. Offensively, defensively, as a support, right? Gives you a lot of offensive buffs, gives you a lot of solid heals and stuff. He's just very, very good. And, well, sometimes if you want to beat a stage faster, if you want to clear a stage better, a lot of times Bennett would be that character that I'd have to, pull out in my team. And as much as I hate it, sometimes, I don't hate it that much, but like, as much as I don't like to do it sometimes, Bennett sometimes, in a lot of cases, is the answer, because he's such a universal support that you can throw him into, again, almost any team in the game, and instantly that team becomes better, right? So, with that being said, again, let's still talk about it, because a lot of people would argue, come on, it's not even a PvP game, it's just a PvE game. How is there meta in a PvE game? Like, come on, right? Well, there kind of is one, right? Even if you're not fighting other players, there's still the issue with, especially with free-to-play players, what is the end game? What's the goal over here? Well, it's just to clear everything in the game, right? If you can't clear everything in the game, you, a lot of times, are missing out on rewards, which, again, could always be a bit of an inconvenience, especially for free-to-play players. For people who can clear these contents, right, they just get more rewards than people who can't. That's just an unfortunate reality at this conjuncture, right? So what is the meta specifically, right? Because we do have to, figure out that question first. Well, I'd say, simply put, is just clearing stages at this point. The big one being Spiral Abyss, obviously. That's generally considered the hardest content in the game, bar a few events here and there, right? But generally the hardest content in the game consistently is Spiral Abyss to 36 star it, etc., right? And that being said, right, there are a few factors to that. It's not just, clearing the Spiral Abyss, because a lot of characters in the game could clear the Spiral Abyss, right? I mean, I've seen people do it with Liyue, obviously very powerful. I've seen people do it with Amber, but then again, if you look at those, certain clears, right? If you see someone clearing with Amber, then you see someone clearing with Liyue, for example, right? Yeah, maybe the player with Amber can clear it, right? But the player with Liyue, usually, again, a lot of factors, controlling for artifacts, this and that, all that stuff, person, how well they use a character, their teams, this, again, a lot of other stuff, RNG, etc. But generally, the Liyue player would have an easier time clearing it than the Amber, player, which is, again, just slightly unfortunate. It is how it is. I'm sorry, all the Amber fans out there, but Liyue is a stronger character than Amber, generally, right? So I guess that comes to the question, well, what makes a character strong in this game? Well, and there are a lot of factors what makes a character meta, right? Again, the first one, we already mentioned this a bit, which is the content, right? Because a lot of the times the content does kind of dictate how powerful a character is. For example, we've talked about this a bit yesterday, right, with Venti, and comparing Venti and Kazuha, right? Like, Venti has an insane CC, crowd control, on his Q, right, that, Kazuha doesn't have. But Kazuha also has some better things over him, like the elemental damage bonus, all that stuff, right? But again, sometimes it just depends on stage. Early on, when the Spiral Abyss is mostly just small characters that can be sucked into the Venti Vortex thing, right? Would you say Venti is, well, also back then Kazuha didn't exist, but you know, but back then Venti was an absolute monster, right? And honestly, if the stages, you know, nowadays, again, if the Abyss nowadays still had mostly those kind of enemies that you'd fight, Venti would still be fantastic. I mean, Venti's still great, but he's just not as crazy when you can't just completely immobilize the opponents, you know, in the field, right? So that's always a factor, right? What opponents are we facing? What kind of stages? Another example would be Zhongli, right? Zhongli being once absolutely unstoppable, just throw him on a team and then your team is just, you know, straight up cannot die, right? And then that was until they introduced, well, corrosion into the game, then healing, which, you know, saw a bit of a decrease in usage before that. Now all of a sudden back, you know, quite popular over something like, you know, perpetual shields with Zhongli, right? With, again, things like corrosion being a bit of a factor in some of the hardest stages in the game, like Abyss, right? So the first thing is how great or how meta a character is, again, is sometimes quite determined by what stages you're trying to you know, go against, right? And what sort of enemies you face. The other thing is, well, obviously the character itself. There's always going to be, again, just power levels to a character. If you're looking at, for example, cryo bow characters, right? Ganyu is just better than Aloy. Like, straight up, stat-wise, skills-wise, right? Usage, all that stuff. Ganyu is just a better character than Aloy. But, again, that's just most of the, you know, most surface stuff, right? If you look at some other things, right? How great a character is. Look at weapon availability, right? Weapon availability is also, I would say, pretty huge, right? What sort of weapons they have, which sort of, you know, how powerful is their best in slot and how well it fits them. Like Goro, for example, right? I mean, Goro's fine, you know, geo support and all that stuff, but if you look at Goro's available weapon options, like, what's his best option? It's like Favonius bow? Sacrificial? Like, there's nothing that really fits him, right? In terms of his whole, don't get me wrong, those are fine bows for him, but they just don't fit as well for Goro as, like, for example, Kagura's Verity fits well for, like, Yae Miko or something, right? So that's always a factor as well, right? Another one could be artifacts. Artifacts are huge, like, look at someone like, let's see, or just straight up look at, like, the Nemo characters, right? Maybe all but, like, maybe Xiao, I guess, right? All the Nemo characters, you straight up just have the ability to use a Verdescent, one of the strongest, you know, set of artifacts in the game. Like, if you're an Nemo, if you can swirl, which most, you know, not most, all Nemos can swirl. I mean, if they ever come out with a Nemo character that can swirl, that would be an issue, right? But, you know, Verdescent as an artifact in general has so much value and is just so good for a Nemo characters. It just straight up makes all of them, regardless of their kit, instantly valuable to almost, you know, all teams in the game. And then look at maybe something like I don't know, like Electro characters. If you look at, like, Electro like DPS characters, their best, like, artifact sets, right? It's like, if again, going for DPS and stuff, a lot of times it's like Thundering Fury, Thunder Soother, which are fine, but they're also not, you know, they're not crazy. They're just not crazy. And some characters just don't have an artifact set that completely fits them. Kokomi, for example, right? Before Tenacity came out, before Clam set came out, like, Kokomi straight up did not have that much of an artifact set to really run her with. And that, again, is also another issue influencing how powerful she is. Once, you know, again, Tenacity came out, once Clam set came out, right? It just straight up made Kokomi so much better. Oh, look at that. I need to fish one of those. Anyways, I'll fish it later. But yeah, there's just a lot of, again, a lot of things. Speaking of elements, right? Straight up, or the viridescent elements a huge factor as well, right? If you look at Pyro innately is just incredibly powerful because of all these reactions that they could get, right? Melt and vape that they could trigger or utilize, right? It's just very, very powerful. Their elemental resonance, right? Is that the word, resonance? Is straight up just very, very good. If you have 2 powers in the game, 25% increase on attack. Like, for what? Just for having 2 powers on the team, right? And then you look at something like Electro. Electro, on the other hand, not very powerful. Does that mean, you know, Electro characters all suck? No, obviously not. Raiden's one of the strongest characters in the game. But is it because she's Electro? Not exactly, right? Not exactly. Just because her kit's very, very good. But if you made her, like, for example, if you turned Raiden into, like, Pyro, would Pyro Raiden be much, much better? You know, if everything else being the same? Probably, because again, Pyro just has, you know, better reactions, better, you know, well, the element of resonance as well. And then if you look at another great example, Geo. Geo used to suck. Geo used to be straight up hot garbage. It was so bad that Hoyoverse even realized it. I was like, or back then, MiHoYo, I was like, oh my god, these rocks are terrible. Let's make these let's polish these rocks up, make them a bit better, and now they're obviously much, much better, right? With their geo resonance, like look at the 20% geo resonance or resistance shred, right? Extra 50% damage as well. It's just like Geo just straight up became much, much better than they used to be before, right? So again, elements another huge factor. What else we got? Support characters, or characters that could help, you know, you utilize this. Like, for example, we could go back to Bennett. Bennett as a support character, there's so many units that you could straight up just, or so many teams that you could plop him in, use him in, right? And then if you take another character, for example, you know, one of my favorites, Genshin, right? Genshin is great in those very specific scenarios where you know, run her with like a Yoimiya or maybe like a Eula, I guess, right? But otherwise, or Child maybe, right? Although I think they all have better teams. Oh, maybe not Yoimiya, but like, she just doesn't have that many characters that really utilize her kit as well as, for example, again, something like Bennett. Bennett, you throw him in anywhere, or Sucrose. Throw Sucrose in Xingqiu, throw Xingqiu anywhere, right? Same thing with Zhongli, right? Or again, the other way around. For example, if you look at damage dealers, if you look at I don't know, Ayaka has fantastic teammates, right? Whether it's Shenhe over here, right? Xingqiu, of course. If you're going for, again, Freeze, right? I guess Kokomi would be great for her as well, right? Rosario, there's just like a lot of great characters that could help this character become much, much better, which again, some certain characters do not have. Like, again, like Amber, even though you are a Pyro character, you'd think, well, Pyro character is very, very good, right? Well, not really in some cases, right? Amber doesn't have the best, you know, teammates you could run with. Another one, Xiao, right? And I love Xiao. I can't wait to actually try him out with the new artifact set, right? But he also doesn't have the best teammates, you know, due to some issues with energy recharge and like the other, a lot of Anemo characters don't help him out that much, right, etc. So there's definitely issues there, right? So the point I'm laboriously trying to get to is that what the meta is can definitely change drastically based on, again, a lot of different characteristics, right? So again, maybe when a character first comes out, right, something like Diluc. Diluc was crazy when he first came out. Best, you know, damage dealing game, etc., this and that. And then a few weeks later, Klee came out, boom, blows Diluc out of the water. And then later on, Hu Tao comes out, and like Diluc's even more, you know, oppressed now, I guess, right? There's just so many different factors that again influence how powerful or how meta a character is, right? There's always going to be different changes in the game that could you know, make a character weaker or make a character more powerful, right? Whether it's changes, again, in the hardest content, in terms of enemy-wise, right? New artifacts, new weapons, new support characters, right? Or characters to run those support characters with. You know, how great their element is. Again, they've buffed elements before, so it's not like they're immune to doing that. So, yeah, my point is, like, there's just so many different factors that can happen after a character's release, before the character's release, right? That could make a character much, much better or make them much, much worse later on. Obviously, there are a lot of things built into a character that makes a character less likely to age bad, right? But again, it's always not up to, you know, really not up to us, because it's, you know, the dev team on the other side who's that's controlling what artifact sets are coming out next, what weapons are coming out next, right? Which new maybe 4-star support characters I think they're out next, right? That could again either benefit, like for example, they're giving a pretty solid push for Yoimiya, right? For the moment being, with new artifact support characters, all that stuff, that could definitely make I think Yoimiya much, much better, right? And you know, sometimes they do things that could make characters much worse over time, like again something like Venti, even though I don't think Venti's bad. Again, I think Venti's fine, but a lot of current Abyss enemies, they just can't really get affected by his Q that much, right? I mean, he still swirls and stuff, which is great, but it, you know, they not from a crown control sense. So yeah, like the meta does exist, right? Sometimes you'll have to use characters you don't want to use if you want, you know, to get the most out of rewards, contents, and all that stuff. Again, especially for free-to-play players, but also don't stress too much about it, right? Don't stress too much about it. Things can change, right? Things always change, right? Maybe one day that character that you really like that was never that useful in certain scenarios might just, you know, be much, much better because they decided, well, I'm gonna add an artifact to massively buff this certain character, or another character that could massively help this certain character. Like again, Kokomi, great example, right? Over here, right, in terms of the artifact sets that they came out with to help Kokomi and such, right? So, or with what they're trying to do with Yoimiya over here, just really don't worry too much about it, right? There hasn't been any like character that's just like straight up like terrible that they've came out with. Like even Yaimiko, which a lot of people do consider as not that great of a 5-star character, like she's not terrible. She still has, you know, pretty solid upsides, being, you know, a character that she is, right? And we might not like how the approach to how they make characters better, but it is definitely something that they have been doing and are, you know, definitely more willing to do in the future as well with all these characters. So eventually, right, even if you are someone who you just pull for meta, right, and sometimes you miss out on your favorite character, which again, in my opinion, I would not do that. I would always go for my favorite characters at least, right? But if you are someone who pulls for meta just because you want to get the extra gems, because it's understandable, the extra primo gems are nice, right? Definitely nice. Don't worry too much about it. Maybe once the character reruns, right, next time, it'll get much, much better, right? That's definitely always a possibility. And it seems to sort of have that kind of pattern, right? A lot of characters that got rerun got much, much better, right? Afterwards, for example, like Eula, after her rerun, Eula got better, right? Again, Kokomi, Yoimiya, so I just wouldn't stress too much about it. So anyways, that's really this one, I guess. I hope you all enjoyed. Just a random little, I guess, I don't even know what this is. It's not even a rant. It's just a bit of a rant about, you know, pulling for meta, this or that, right? Because it's not a bit of discourse over the Venti Kazuha thing, right? I mean, again, if you love Venti, just go for Venti, man. He's still fine, right? And there's always hope for him in the future, right? If they come out with new modes that make him much, much better, they'll, you know, more smaller enemies for him to deal with, right? There's always use for them, and also even for those stronger characters who seem really, really good at the moment, they could always make them, well, maybe not as powerful in the future if they, again, change some modes, power creep them with other characters, this and that. Like, the meta is always ever changing. With every single update, there's going to be changes to it, right? So just don't stress too much about it, basically. So, anyways, that's the way this one, I guess. Hope you all gentlemen, guys, think in the comments down below. Like, just finish our channel for some more Genshin Impact content. I'll see you guys in the next one, then.